Hello and welcome back to the Cosmic Acad. In this video, we are going to learn variable, constant, and data type. Imagine you are in kitchen. Now think about all the containers and labels you see around. This is the perfect way to understand variables, constant, and data type in programming, specifically in Go. Let's start with variable. So a variable is like a jar in your kitchen. You can use it to store anything you want, right? And then you are free to change what's inside those jars, right? Today the jar might have cookies. Tomorrow you want to replace the jar with sugar or something else or grains, right? You should be able to do that. The jar is the same, it's just the content that can change. In programming, a variable works the same way. It's just a container where you store information and you can update it whenever you need, right? So let's see that how we can define a jar, how we can create a jar container in a programming, Golang programming. So how can we do that? So creating a variable, Golang says you need to use var keyword. And what is keyword? Keyword is nothing but a reserved word defined in a specific programming language. Using that you can create anything you want. So this time I'm going to say, okay, I need to create a variable, and then that variable should store some information, right? Since that is a container, we know that variable is nothing but a container, and then container will be storing the values or information, and those values can be changed later point of time, right? So I'll say, okay, use this keyword var, and then you can define the name of the variable, or you can define the name of the container, right? So I'll say, okay, this time just make it as contains, or we can say let's make it jar, and then we know that if we are going to make a container, we can put some values in that container as well. So how can we do that? So we are going to say, okay, we just created a var, and then we name those jar with name jar, and then here we are going to put certain values or certain, if we'll talk in terms of kitchen, we are going to put, let's say, cookies. So I'll say, okay, in jar we are going to put cookies now, right? And as per the concept of var variable, what we know that we can change this variable later point of time whenever we need that. So I will say, okay, now I need to change this to something else. In that jar, in those jars, I want something else to be there. So I can say simply, okay, now this time instead of cookies, let's put sugar. All right. So this is how exactly variable works. Variable is just a container in Golang programming or any other programming where you can store certain specific information or specific values, right? So this is how you can define a variable in Golang. Now we have other ways around as well, and how can we do that? So this time I'm going to say, okay, instead of jar, let's create one more variable, and then this time I'm not going to use var keyword over here, because I just want to show you what are different ways of creating variable in Golang. So in this case, I'm not going to use var, then how can we create that, right? For that, Golang says you just need to use colon equals to, and then if you want to put certain values in that variable, you can put that, of course. So this time I'm going to say, okay, very first I'm going to put water in this bottle, cool. And then as per the concept of variable, we know that if we have certain content, certain specific data or information in that variable, later point of time, if wherever we need, we should be able to change those variables, right? So here I'm going to say, okay, previously we have water over there in that bottle, now I want to keep juice. So what we can say is, okay, this time bottle is equal to juice. Great. So this is how actually we should be defining a variable and what variable exactly is. All right. Next we are going to talk on constant. So what is constant exactly? Constant is nothing but the value which is never going to be changed. All right. So same thing there in the Go programming language as well. So if we define a constant, that means those values is never going to be changed throughout the program until we change that manually. Okay, so here I will say, okay, let's just assume this bottle is going to be of 500 ml. Alright, this container bottle is of 500 ml. We know that if this bottle is 500 ml, we cannot change that. It will be 500 ml always until we replace that bottle. Correct? So we should be able to store water of maximum 500 ml and then juice as well. But then this value is never going to change. So how can we say that? How can we define a constant over there? We know that how can we put the contents inside those bottles, and that contents can change over the period of time. Whenever we need that, we need to change that. But then constant should not be changed. So let's say I'll say, okay, constant. So how can we define constant actually? So we need to just say const, const, which is again a keyword which is predefined in Golang programming language, and using that you should be able to create the constant, right? So I will say, okay, constant, and then of course you need to name that constant. So I will say, like in case of variable, we named that variable, right? We named that container. So here as well we are going to name that container, but then we are saying that value should never be changed, right? So we'll say, okay, bottle capacity, for example, capacity equals to, this is just a name, you can name it whatever you want. All right, so I'll say constant bottle capacity equals to, let's say 500. So this, if we'll say it as a constant, that means this variable, not variable but the constant, this container is never going to be changed. If you want to change it, it will give you error. It will restrict you to change that variable, not variable but constant. So let's see that how it will give error. So I'll say, okay, bottle capacity, now this time change this to 600. Will that be possible? Let's see. No, that won't be possible. And how can we say that? You can see red line over there, right? Underlined. If you will just hover on that, you can see here cannot assign to bottle capacity. And why is that so? Because this is going to be of type constant. Okay, this we already said this bottle capacity should not be changed, so we cannot change that. All right, and how can we print all those onto the console? How can we print the output of this variable or output of this bottle capacity onto the console here? Since if we'll run this program, we should be getting some output from this program, so that we can say, okay, this programming is running properly fine, right? Even though we wrote that over there 500, 600 or whatever, but then at the time of running this should be working fine, right? So for that, what I'm going to do, that I'm going to say, okay, just use fmt package. So in Golang we know that everything is a package, right? So in fmt package, fmt is nothing but the short form of format. All right, and this package will have lot of functionality related to input and output system and many others. Okay, so I'm going to say, okay, just use this package, but before using you need to import that as well. So I'll just click on this, and then you can see here that package is imported over here. And then I will say fmt dot, let's say this time I'm going to use one function println. What this will do is it will print this all variable over here which we have defined, or you can say container which we have defined over there, and whatever the contents value, let's say you have kept cookies in those container, and then you want to see that, right? So of course at certain point of time you should be able to go back to the kitchen and then see whatever value, whatever data, not data, but in kitchen if we'll talk about whatever content we have kept in those jars, right? That should be possible. So for that I'm going to use println, so that this all value should be output on the console. Cool. So I'll say, okay, let's use println this time. We have lot more function over there. We will play with all those function, and we'll know exactly what that function do. So here I'm going to say, okay, println, and then inside that println we are going to provide jar over here. Okay, let's cut it from here. Whenever we created this variable, after that I'm going to print that. Okay, So I'll print here as well, because this time we have changed, not changed, but we can see here bottle has been defined, but then bottle should be print as well. So I'll say bottle, and then bottle may have juice. Since we changed the content inside the bottle, so we can put that console line there as well, so that this bottle value will, after changing this value, we should be able to see that okay, this value has changed. And I will say bottle. This is how you are going to use this println function. And then here also we are going to put, so that we can see that what is the capacity of the bottle. So I'll just say print this, and then here as well we can say, not this one, I will just copy this and paste it here. So here also we can see we can do the same thing. Let me just save it and run the program. And we know that how can we run the program. So for that we just need to say go run and then the go file name. So this time our file name is main.go, so of course we need to run it with go run main.go. Now you can see here cannot assign to bottle capacity. Why? Because we know that the concept of constant. We already said this bottle capacity is going to be a constant, and then if that is constant means it should never change, right? You should not be able to change this. So this is completely illegal in Golang. You won't be allowed to change this. So I'll just remove this because this code is not required at all. Now let me just save it and print it back. I mean run this program and see what value you are getting. You can see here we got this value as soon as the program runs. So very first thing we have defined cookies over there, okay, but we didn't put a console, and then we modified those cookies with sugar. So we don't have cookies over there actually. So let me see that now. Let's rerun this program and see if that works. I'll just run it with the same command go run main.go and see if that works. Yeah, that works. You can see here at very first we kept cookies, and then here the cookies came, right? And then again then sugar, water and juice as well, and 500 as well. But in case of constant we are not able to change that values. This is the concept of variable and constant. This is how we are going to define variable and constant in Golang. Alright. Now one more thing we need to understand is data type. So what is data type actually, right? So think of the data type as the type of thing you are putting into your container, or the variable or the constant. Alright. So in your kitchen jars can hold different things, right? Cookies, sugar or water. Similarly in programming, variable and constant can store different types of information, right? So in Go, some common data types are string, integer, float 64, float, bool, and what is that exactly? We'll see that. So let me just, we understood how we can create a variable constant, right? Now let me just clear this over here, and then here, as I said, we can have multiple data type, multiple information which we are going to put inside those containers, right? And in terms of kitchen, if we'll talk, of course we know that what kind of things we are going to keep in those jars, right? What kind of foods or whatever we are going to keep in that jar. So we can have lot of food over there in terms of kitchen. Similarly, in case of programming, Golang programming, we can have n number of type over there, n number of information, piece of information over there, right? So let's see some of those, and then over the next video we'll learn all those data type which is present, and also we should be able to create a new data type as well, and all those we'll see that in action. So I'll just list down couple of data type which we will be using across this tutorial. So we have this string, we have integer value, and then we can have decimal value as well. So how can we define a decimal values, right? So for that we have float 32, float 64 as well. All right. Next we have bool. What is bool? Bool is nothing but a truthy value, and it can be true or false. We have only two options over there in bool. It can be true or false. We'll see all that just below. So this time I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to create one container, variable or jar. So I'll say, okay, I'm going to name this container as cookies. So we should be able to store only cookies in this jar, not the other data. That is the actually data type. That means you are going to say, okay, the content which you are going to put over there should be of cookies. Actually should be cookies. Otherwise I won't allow you to keep that. Right? So I'll say, okay, cookies, and then I will say, since we created a container, we can keep certain values over there. So I can say cookies, right? But then what is the data type? We kept here. We know that of course this is cookies, but in terms of programming, if we will say here, this is nothing but a string. Anything which is enclosed in a double quotes is considered to be as a string of type string. Cool? So this is just a string. Okay. Now we said this to golang. Okay, this cookies is going to be a string, right? But then let me just print this cookies. So I can say, we know that how can we print that? We have a lot of print option over there, but then I'm just going to use println. You can use whatever you want. So just play with different functionalities so that you will be able to explore it more. So now here I'm going to say, okay, just print this cookies, and we'll just run this program and see how it works. So I'll say, okay, go run main.go. Of course this is the way we can run the program, and we can see here, okay, cookies is there in the specific jar, right? We just name those jar over here in the println function, and then it is actually giving the output. Output is nothing but the content inside those container, right? The data, the information which you kept inside those containers, right? So that is exactly fine. Now since this is going to be of type string, we know that if we'll hover on this, you can see here variable cookies of type string, right? And how can we ensure that? We know that anything which is enclosed in a double string, double quotes, is considered to be of type string data type. All right. So now we told this to golang, okay, this cookies container is always going to be a string. Its data type is a string. But then if I'm going to say, okay, I want to store water here, not water, let's say I'm going to store something else, 5. Will that be possible? No, that won't be possible, because we are restricting this jar to contain only the data or information that is going to be of type string, not the other data type, right? But this time we are not going to provide this piece of information or data as a type of string. That is why it is giving error. You can see here, if I'll just hover on that, you can see cannot use 5 as a string value in assignment, because this cookies is expected to be a type of string, but we are providing number over here, or you can say integer, right? So let me just save it and run it, and we'll see exactly what error we are getting over there. You can see here cannot use 5, the same error which we are seeing there, right? So this is the way we are going to define a data type. These are all the data type which is present in golang. So we just saw a string, and then of course this value is integer. Now if we want to change this, of course the next value is going to be string only, otherwise it will just throw error, because we already said we are going to store the data type as a string in this specific container or in this specific cookies jar, correct? So here I'm going to say, okay, instead of cookies, let's put sugar over there. I'll just save it and rerun it, and let's see if that works. So let me just rerun it and see if it is working. You can see here we should be able to place cookies in place of, we should be able to place sugar in place of cookies, and that's completely legal, because sugar is also going to be of data type string, right? It is also type of string. And how can we say that? We know that anything which is enclosed inside double quotes in golang is considered to be as type of string. Cool. So this is a string data type. Now we are going to see integer data type. So I'll say, okay, create one more container, and this time I'll say, let's say capacity, right? Capacity, and then I'll say 5 or 500, right? So now we are defining a variable with name capacity, container name capacity, and then this is going to be of type integer, and we know that what can be the integer value. It can be 0 1 2, not 0 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10, right? So the same we are going to use here. Okay, 500 we said, and then let me just console this over here. So I'll say fmt dot println, and then I'll say capacity. Let me just save it and print it to the console. Right? We can see, okay, sugar is for this cookies, since we have cookies container also they are defined in this program. But then we have defined capacity as well, and we can see capacity is 500, that is of type integer. Let me just hover on that and see. Yeah, we can see that type integer. But then if we want to put different value, different data type value in this capacity, it should be giving error. Let's see that. So I'll say, okay, I'll define this capacity as a type of integer, but then if I'll say, okay, capacity, you just put cookies over there, will that be possible? No, that won't be possible, because we know that we cannot assign a different value or different piece of information in a container which is already defined of a certain specific type, correct? So this is the way we are going to define a variable, constant, and then of course the data type. Once the data type is defined, we cannot change that. Okay, so I'm just going to remove this from here since it will be giving error. And then we saw that what is integer data type, and how can we make sure, okay, this type is actually integer. See, we can hover on this, of course this is showing integer, right? But then while program runs, right, that time itself, how can we ensure that, okay, this type is going to be of integer? For that I'm going to use one function over here. And what is the function actually? If you guys are beginner, you might be confusing what is function, how it is working. Function we'll learn in upcoming videos. We have separate videos for that, and in that we'll just discuss all those function concepts. But for now you can just use this function and then your work will be done. So this time I'm going to say, okay, just use one more thing over here, and this time we need the type. Of course we have contents for the specific container, whatever we kept over there, but then we need type as well, what kind of piece of information over there. So instead of println, I'm going to say, okay, just let's comment this and use some different function. I'm going to say printf this time. Alright, and then I'm going to just say, okay, just use double quote over there. You just need to remember this. How can we use this function? This function is actually expecting a format of type string, you can see here, right? So I'll say, okay, just use this string, and then I'll say value, or you can say value, not value, data. You can say whatever you want, value, data, or contents inside this cookies container, right? So I'll say cookies container or variable, right, is equals to, now how can we print the value actually here when we are using printf function? For that we are going to say percentage, okay, and how exactly it will work I will let you know. So we'll say percentage, and then I will say okay, value. So for value, if we want this value, so we'll say just percentage %v, or if we know the exact data type of the value, we can use the data type as well over there. So we know that in this case we defined this variable as a string, so we can say that percentage %s, that means it is going to be string value, okay, but we don't know what is the exact value over there. We know the value will be there, but what is exact value we don't know, right? So next what we are going to say, okay, and the type of, I can say, okay, and the type of the value or data or content is going to be something, right? It can be string, it can be integer, it can be float. Of course we didn't see float, right? We'll see that next. So here I'm going to say, okay, we are not sure about the exact value, so we'll say percentage %v, okay. But then instead of percentage %v, we need the type of this specific jar, right? So instead of value, we don't need value over here, actually we need a type. So I'll say, since value already we have used over here, so we just need type. So for type, what we can say is use percentage %T, which will give you the type of the variable. Alright, so here I'm going to say, okay, that's fine, and then I will put a comma, since if you will just hover on this function, you can see this function is expecting two data. One is format and other one is A. A is nothing, the exact value which we are going to provide from here, so that that value will get replaced in place of this %s, %t, or whatever. So let me just show you. So very first thing is, here we define as a %s, right? So we need to define the corresponding variable first. So I will say, okay, this %s, very first %s should be replaced with cookies. So I'll say cookies, and then this %t as well there, right? So this %t is second formatting string, right? So this should be replaced with capacity. So second, I'll say, okay, just replace it with this capacity, actual capacity which we defined over there. Now let me just save this and I will run this code, and let's see if that works. You can see here value, data type, content, inside cookies container, sugar. Okay, value is sugar, of course, there, because we have modified those values. But then why we are getting the type of the value is as an integer? It should be actually cookies itself. So what is the exact issue? Okay, we have, instead of using this cookies, we need to get the type of cookies, right? So instead of cookies, we said capacity. So we need to provide cookies as well, because this second parameter we can see here, the second formatting string is going to be replaced with the second parameter here, right? So this cookies will get actually replaced over here, and then this time this %t will just print the type of the cookies, what in piece of information, which kind of data is there, right? But then we need one more. I'll just copy this and paste it on the next line. We need the same console for this capacity as well. So I'll say, okay, not cookies this time, I'll say capacity, and then of course this capacity is now going to be of type integer. We know that we have defined that variable as integer, right? If you're not sure about the variable, which kind of data you put there, instead of %s or %s is of course the string. But then if we are not sure about what is there, what data type is there, you can use %v over there. So it will work in the expected way. Let's see that. So I can say %v, because let's assume you don't know the data type of this variable. So I'll just put %v, and then of course we need the type as well. So instead of cookies, this time we are going to say get me the value of the capacity, and then get me the type of the capacity as well. So I'll just provide this capacity and then capacity, because we know that this first capacity is going to be replaced here, and what will be the value? The value will be the actual value of the capacity, which is of course 500 in this case, and then the data type of the capacity, which is going to be decided by using %T, right? Let me just save this, and I will just make it a little bigger so that you guys will be able to see that clearly. Now what I'll say, okay, just run this program once more and see if that works. We can see here, okay, but this time it's getting printed on the same line, right? So for that, what I'll say is, okay, just print on the next line. And how can we say that? You can see here we have two printf over there, but this printf will actually format the string. But then next, if we are calling subsequent printf statement or println, that won't come on the next line. And then the readability is, you can see here, we are not able to read it properly. So for that we can use \n, which will just terminate this string over to the next line. So anything which is getting printed after this /n will get printed on the next line into the console. So let's just save this and run it again and see if that works. You can see here now it is splitting into two and coming on the next line, right? So this time, okay, sugar we saw, sugar is of course of type string, and then you can see here capacity is of course 500, the value of capacity is 500, and the type of the value, data or content, you can say, is integer, int. That's what we defined over here in the very beginning, right? So this is integer data type, we understood that. But then we have one more issue, not issue, but I want to show you. Instead of this value, since we were not sure about the value, we don't know, we assumed we don't know the capacity of the data type of the capacity, right? But if we are sure of the data type of the capacity, we are going to use the exact formatting string over there, so that it will just print the exact value. So this time we know that, okay, the capacity is going to be of type integer. So instead of %v for printing or for formatting integer, we are going to use %d. That means this value will be replaced with this capacity value, and it should be of type integer. Let me just save it and then rerun it. We can see it works in the same way, right? So this is how we are going to define a string, integer, and the integer, and we are going to define a couple of more variable over there. So I'll say this time just use float32, which is going to be of type, it's just decimal data, right? And how can we do that? So let's see. Let's say amount equals to, of course we created a container, we created a data, not data, but then you can say jar, and then this time this jar will have amount, and then I can say I have 100 and 0.50, right? So you can see here, in case of capacity we just use the integer value, right? But in case of amount we can have 0.50 there as well, right? That is completely legal, and when we will just hover on this, we can see the data type of this variable is float64, and if you want to use float32, you should be able to do that as well. But how can we do that? For that, golang says you need to explicitly tell me the data type of the variable. So I'll say float32. Now this data type, this container will store only the information as float32 data type. Okay, so let me just hover on this and see if the data type is float32. Yes, the data type is of type float32, correct? Now the same thing I'm going to do here as well. I will just copy it from here, paste it here, and then this time again we can do the same thing. If we are not sure about the data type, we are going to use %v over here, right? But then in this case we are sure about the data type 100.50, right? So we can say, let's say %f, that should be actually the float value, and then %d is of course going to be the type. So instead of this capacity, this time we need to say, okay, get me the value and the type of amount, not the capacity, because capacity already we saw. Let me just save this, and then this time as well, after this printing, this line should be coming on the next line, right? For that we can say use %n, which is breaking, you can see break statement, or it will just break the string on the next line. So let's save this, and I will just clear the console so that you can see it clearly, and then I will run this program, and you guys should be able to see what's the expectation over there. So you can see here, okay, we have value as 100.50000, and we have defined as 50 only, then why this much of decimal point is coming over there? It should not come. The answer is this specific variable you can see here as a type of data type of float 32, correct? So if this is a float 32, it can store this much of decimal point. That's the concept of using float 32 and float 64. Let me just replace it with float 64 and see what we are getting over there. Not 34 but 64. Let me just save it. This time you see that how it works. I'll just rerun this program and see if that works in the same way. Of course this works in the same way, right? But then we should have, we can be able to save lot of more data after this decimal point, lot of more data node, lot of more bit. All right, so this is what the string, integer and float 32 or float 64 is. Now let's see one more data type here as a boolean. So I'm just going to define one more jar, one more container, and then I'm going to say okay, just use the name of the jar is going to be what should be the name? You can name it whatever you want. So this time I'm going to say statement, and then I'm going to say it is true. So this statement is going to be true if we know that if this data type of the statement is going to be boolean, then it should be holding only true or the false values, not the other values, right? So I'm going to use the same over here as well, and then again this time we need to terminate because we have lot more line down below. Not in this case, of course we have one line, but we can have n number of lines, right? So I'll say okay, use this percentage, not percentage backspace in, and then this time I need here not the capacity, but this time I need, okay, this time previous you need to use amount because you have console amount there. So here I need, instead of capacity I need a statement. Okay, this statement is going to be true or false, truthy value, right? So I'll say okay, this statement is true. Okay, so I'll say okay, this time how can we say that, how can we console the value of this boolean? How can we do that? This time what I'll do is, okay, let's console it with using %v because I'm not sure about what should be used here to define, to print the exact value of this data type boolean, right? So for that we know that if we are not sure about, we'll just put %v, which will just actually put the value. But then in case of %t, of course this will print the type of this statement. So instead of amount, this time I'm going to say statement. Now let me just save it, and then I'll just clear this console and run this program again. We can see that this value is true. Of course the value we defined here as a true, and then the type of the data is boolean. That means data type is boolean. If you want to change it to some other values, of course you should be able to do this, but then this time the value is going to be false. Let me just save it and rerun this if that works. You can see here this time the value is coming as false, and then the content is not content but the type of the content is boolean. So we learned variable, constant, and then the data type, right? Of course we saw 4 data type over here, but in the upcoming videos over the period of this course or tutorial we'll be able to see lot more data type, and then we'll be able to create our custom data type as well there, right? As simple as that. This is how you are going to do this. Okay, if you guys have any issues or you're facing any problem, please let me know in the comment section. I will try to resolve that as soon as possible. Please do subscribe my YouTube channel and then press the bell icon as well. Thank you guys. I will meet you in the next video.